driving your brand with communities. And to facilitate this session, we have our in-house community wizard, John Summers. John has over 10 years of experience in the community space. So take it away, John.
Thanks so much for that wonderful intro. And I'll give you a little bit of an overview of my little take on today. I think it's been some great conversations, and hearing community come up in multiple threads has been really wonderful for me to hear. As I was talking to someone the other day, and their community is hitting a 20-year anniversary this year. So they've been around for a while, and I really think communities have been on the forefront of driving some of this digital transformation before even this pandemic was there, as we were really setting up, being able to facilitate remote conversations and to be able to have that digital workplace environment. And I think the pandemic and the situation that we're in right now has just pushed the community that much more into the limelight. And we see now that we've just heard that what a priority having those interactions with your customers and getting that engagement from them. As community can be a major touch point along with data as well too. We heard earlier about the mass amount of data and mashing that data up together. Community and community interactions are just one more of those data points that can really round out the picture of keep delivering that customer 360 view. So today, to talk about communities and brand, I'm super proud to have Heather McNair, Chief Community Officer at Higher Logic. She's been a rock star over there for like 8 years. I've known her, and you're missing out. So we're really excited to have her join us as well. See if she gets up there. While she's loading in there, we also have my buddy Danny Weinstein. So he's Senior Director, Customer Community and Growth at Kaltura. He brings over 14 years of experience from communities like Domo and HP. I've done some stuff with him in the past, so I'm really happy to get his opinions, and someone I've always looked up to myself as a leader in the community space. And so hi guys, welcome. I see Danny there. Hopefully Heather will get in video in a minute. I guess that's a good lead in, right? Is we've all had to make big adjustments in the way we work this last year. And us being community practitioners, how have you seen the communities really pivot, or have they pivoted, or just really pushed on the gas is what I feel personally. And let's start with you, Heather. How do you think they've really evolved this year, or have they?
I more than evolved. Yeah, I think putting foot on the gas is probably the best way to describe it. We've seen in our communities, like overall, they have increased, and this is across like almost 2,000 communities. We've seen 100% increase in participation. In fact, the funny story. Wow. Back in March, when everyone went to this virtual environment, we started having alerts going off to our engineering team. Like all of a sudden, stuff is going crazy. Like your virtual databases, virtual servers are spinning themselves up. What's going on? And we realized it's just because customers' sites are our traffic's going nuts on them. So it was a really great thing. And the exciting thing is that momentum has kept up. And I think the customers, the organizations who already had communities in place were able to hit the ground running. Like they converted events over into their community space. They were able to move resources into their community space. They were, customers were able to help customers versus the organizations that didn't have that community, that didn't have that online collaboration space, were playing catch up.
That's great. So, Danny, how have you seen from, on the practitioner side of thing and being out there building them, how have you really seen communities evolve over the last year, or has it just been nose down, pedal to the metal, and keep doing what we've doing?
No, the space is definitely coming up. It's evolving and growing, and the demand is certainly skyrocketing. I mean, certainly in trading notes with my peers in the industry, and the volume in existing communities, as Heather pointed out, have gone up double digit, even triple digit in some cases. But even beyond that, on the practitioner side, for someone who was in transition in 2020, the demand for the role roles and the level of expertise that is in demand has certainly gone up, and I think our day is finally coming. And so I think there's finally a reckoning, like this is not just a nice to have, it's a must to have. It's a fundamental element of the IT stack and part of the business operation. And frankly, the community professional needs to have a seat at the C-suite. And so, having chief community officers is not something as a nice to have or someday. It's actually a tier, and that's what we're all trying to aspire to. In addition to not being a one-person show at a particular brand, but really developing a true organization that can serve value across the organization. So we've talked about this earlier. With this horizontal model where it's not just a support community, it's driving value across support and content and education and engineering for ideation, and certainly advocacy in the marketing side. That's what we're going to talk a lot about today.
Yeah, I think that the whole concept, like I said, of horizontally integrated community, I love that concept. And I think for a while we saw like that the priority, my experience in working, that the priority for communities was customer support, right? And there was for a while that seemed like that was like the driving force behind it. But I've seen this last year where now companies are really coming at it purely from an advocacy and a brand perspective, which is I think a great shift to showing value, right? Because the brand value is immense. Yes, case deflection is real. We all know case deflection is real and bottom line dollars. And if you can show that, you're ahead of the game. But the brand value, I think, is even more valuable from my experiences at NetApp running. We were a brand community, right? And EA and other places where that was the primary. How have you guys seen the shift to more brand-centric communities? People moving off social media, wanting their own branded community, right? You want to kick us off there, Heather?
Yeah, and I will say in kind of over the last couple of years, I've definitely seen an evolution away. When we first started talking with corporations about it, it was like support deflection, support deflection, support deflection. And I always cringed about it because, it seems like this black and white, easy to prove, easy to put numbers behind it. And I actually think it's a lot trickier than people think it is, because it's like, well, someone's still having to answer those questions.
Right.
But so it's not as black and white as you think it is. But we've been able to do some studies. We're actually working on a really big study right now that ties it into like community participation into NPS scores and customer retention and likelihood to churn and upsell potential. And I think when you can tie it to much bigger numbers like that, it's like you can save, $35 up to, $300, depending on the cost of a support ticket to your organization. Like, yeah, I mean, that adds up. Obviously, in big organizations, that can be millions of dollars over the course of the year. But when you're talking about actually retaining customers and turning them into advocates and that whole like customer referral, word of mouth, actually growing an advocate program and putting real numbers behind that, that's millions of dollars. And, and that that's game changing. And so when you can, I've seen that shift in I'll call it like an elevation of the discussion around the power of community. That really excites me because it's just a whole different ballpark.
No, I agree. We used to try to measure brand share of voice, right? And we saw this huge inflection point after our brand share of voice went up drastically after we implemented a community. We were competing against a much bigger incumbent in the space. And we were trying to capture as much brand voice as we could. And that was something we were able to draw a good correlation between brand share of voice in your community. Yeah. What about yourself, Danny? How have you seen the resurgence of brand communities versus just prickly I want support?
No, absolutely. And this is what we were looking to successfully do. When I was hired at Domo, was exactly to do that. It was really a customer community to drive value across the organization. And it was an evolution that took quite a number of years to realize. And so in short order, you could certainly prove out the deflection numbers and content creation numbers and hours saved on technical writing and even research hours on ideation of ideas generated in the community. But longer term, as you cultivated a community of advocates and super fans in community and had them, speaking at user groups and your conferences and being on reference calls, and actually tying it to, and we were in the data analytics space, we had our own company health or account health scorecards. We could actually show at the 35,000 foot level, okay, here are accounts that have active members, those that do not, and they were typically several points healthier and several points lower at risk from a renewal and upsell perspective. And when you're in a SaaS business, and that's how you live and breathe. So that was huge. I think the elusive element there was really getting the granular, much more granularity on those matrices and activities, really understanding the day to day, but certainly at the high level we're able to do that, and that's certainly something that I intend to do with my new community that we're going to be launching.
Yeah, that's the retention metrics. That's like a newer one for me this year, maybe the last year and a half, maybe 2 years. You're starting to hear that tying back to retention. I think it was after the Salesforce, like they came out and reported those huge high numbers about retention and stuff. So I think that shows a really good way to measure community is by that, and it can really show the value of it. But so now we're talking about retention, and so what about what other kind of metrics? I think we heard the presentation earlier talking about this mashups of metrics to drive sales awareness, and what kind of metrics do you think brand and community metrics really would you be trying for, if you're saying, hey, you should be tracking these type of things and driving towards your brand? We heard obviously, the case deflection and the retention stuff. That's more on the sales side of things. But what are some brand metrics that people might try to?
Well, certainly, I think especially on from a platform perspective, community drives learning and growing and usage of your product. And so, that inherently, the greater usage you have of your customers using your platform, they're essentially strengthening their belief in their position on the brand itself. And so they're going to, whether they intend to do it or not, they're going to be promoting the usage of the product and indirectly the brand itself. And that was very much correlated to, higher usage translates into higher adoptions, translates into higher propensity to upsell and renew.
Yeah, I think we've got that, and that's a really fantastic point, Danny. We have adoption metrics that we look at for our application, and it's at a certain point, people should be here, people should be there, people should be there, and yeah, it's tying. We're trying to tie community participation to all of these different kind of tentacles into adoption, into into adoption, into usage, into advocacy, into we're looking at NPS scores. One thing that we've just started to dabble in, our senior VP of data science loves. He geeks out on all this stuff, but is actually sentiment analysis in our community. So I know we're talking about starting to talk about AI a little bit, but so
I like that stuff. Yeah,
but looking at the sentiment of what they're posting in the community to see if is it just because someone may be complaining about something. Does that actually correlate? You kind of freak out about it, but does that actually correlate to, lower or higher churn rates? Or is it, the nature of them complaining about it says they're still engaged?
Yes. I agree with that one. They joined that site, they signed in, they obviously like you somewhat if they're over there saying that and flaming you a little bit, right? So you got to be able to have a little bit of a tougher skin. And I like the little segue to AI, because I think that is a huge area, I think, of growth for community, and especially around brand as well too, because you're talking about listening and the analytics side of things, and being able to leverage those AI tools that are out there to know what people are saying, not just on your community, but any community, and to be able to have a voice out there out there in the social communities versus your own branded community, which I think is, a key thing that, we'll see more and more of, I think, over this next year, whether it's chat or bots but just the intelligence gathering, I think is a huge place to be able to, I think, the elusive customer 360 view, right? So how do you, Donnie, how do you feel about
No, that's an exciting time to get those things automate and scale, especially some of the sentiment pieces. If they've as they're engaged in community and they've been able to either accomplish what they wanted to do or found what they're looking for and so forth. But it also ties back to come back to the earlier piece. The more people you got using your product, that essentially at the end of the day, longer term, it's going to develop a greater pool of people who want to showcase how well they know the product and how well they know your platform, and essentially show off how well they love your brand. And so I think that the sort of the automated AI elements will certainly help to cultivate some of those sentiment elements and automate some of the things that you would need to do in a more manual fashion.
All right, so we got a couple questions here. I'll try to flow them in with me there. So first one here I see here is how can community analytics help marketers with their engagement strategy?
I'd love to take this one.
Okay.
Well, I know one of the themes today, people have talked about data, talked about personalization. I think one of the often overlooked benefits of a community is it is handing you a ton of business intelligence and a ton of data to act on. Like in a typical scenario with a customer, they only really have a few interactions with you in order to personalize things. And I know Amazon always comes up as the gold standard of personalization. You're interacting with Amazon constantly for them to be able to personalize, into a creepy level. All of these things that they're telling you, oh, if you like that, you'll also like this. With a community, if someone is interacting with it, they're giving you hundreds, if not thousands of data points to be able to personalize your communications to them. If they download a resource, if they like a blog or comment on a blog, if they read a post, if they reply to a post, all of those things are giving you data that let you know what Danny is interested in and what he cares about. And you can use that information to personalize your marketing messages to him and make everything you do for him more relevant. And I think that is a huge missed opportunity with communities right now.
Yeah, and to that point, the way I look at it is that the community provides really a snapshot and really a pulse of your customer base on a daily basis. What's top of mind with your customers? What are they talking about? What are they interested in? What do they need? And obviously we're all in a fully digital world today, but normally, that would require a lot of phone calls, a lot of travel to collect that data. But you're getting it really on a 24/7 perspective, and with that, you're able to learn a lot about what's going on, and you can also act upon it to make a better experience and even ultimately make a better product for a platform for your customers.
Yeah, and there are some great companies out there that are, speaking of the sentiment analysis, that are doing they'll take all of your unstructured data, so support tickets, community data, all that stuff, and run an analysis on it and tell you from that analysis, what are the real pain points that are causing your customers to churn, or causing the real, kind of sort through the what are the real problems versus the stuff that people may just be complaining about to complain about, and where are the holes in your documentation, where are the holes in this or that, where should you be focusing your education, that type of thing. One of our other partners did a couple of studies or a couple of projects with some of our customers, and there was amazing stuff, actionable stuff that came out of those.
One report I always love to read these days is it's a searches without results, right? So I go through, so people search for something that they didn't find it in the community. So I'm like, okay, well, if I start seeing a repetitiveness about this is a search without results, it's happened 2 or 3 times, and I'm like, okay, can we make a documentation or a paper or a blog on it and try to fill that gap? And by running simple reports like that, right, you can really amplify the usefulness of your community, right? When people search, they're finding what they're looking for.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on community influencers and their effectiveness on growing communities or increasing leads? You have to have them.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's your secret sauce for community, because again, at the end of the day, they're the ones who are going to be creating a good chunk of the content. They're also going to bring other people to the party, and they're the same people that you're going to be requesting, to really promote your brand at a variety of events, whether it be online or in person. So without them, you don't have a community.
I always related it. Oh, sorry about that. I always relate it to, it's like the cool guy at the bar, right? You want like tons of those guys, right? The more cool guy you have at the bar, then he brings in other people with him, right? And, I always related a community to a social or, bar type of setting, right? People come in, they don't know anybody, they want to meet somebody, they might have an agenda, they may not, but they just want to socialize. And if you don't have other social people there to talk to them, then they probably might come back to your bar. So I've always tried to think of my community as a little bit like a bar, a fun bar.
Yeah, I love that analogy. I also think they can be incredibly helpful because, sometimes I, as staff, like the community manager can say something and it's not quite the same, but if one of them says it, it comes off as much more credible.
Oh, yep. For sure. It's definitely better to have them speak for you, right? All right, so we got a few more minutes left. I guess that's my little closing pitch. Where do you think the future of brand or community is going forward? And what should we be looking out for 2021? My prediction, not really prediction, what we were saying last year was virtual events, and community manager needed to get on board, and we were right. And people that adopted it early. So what do you guys, I'd like to hear you guys' predictions for the next year. What if you had to do one thing, what would you really try to say, focus on this right here?
Well, I think so. In my perspective, it's really making sure that as you're working with your current brand or you're joining the organization, you need to ensure that you've got visibility and buy-in at the very top, and so that it's percolating across the organization. Because the pitch, and like your bar analogy, I use the cafe one. This really is about having an ongoing conversation with your customer base. It doesn't matter whether you're on the support team, the education team, the engineering team, or the marketing team. Everybody has an opportunity to engage with your customers, and community facilitates that 24/7. And so, really, it's doing two things. One is it's driving, making sure that you're positioned for the success across the organization. And two, you pitch it that we're going to, essentially, the value is going to be, across the organization and not sought. And that's I think what we're seeing now, and it's very much tied to the brand value.
Yeah, my advice is not just 2021; it's perennial advice. Make sure the community is about them, not about you. Mm-hmm. People use communities; they come back to communities because they find value in there. That they're getting content, they're getting advice that they can't get anywhere else, or they can't get as easily anywhere else. They have a sense of belonging there. And if the community is about you, is about your organization, they're going to sense that. It will have a sense of artificiality about it, and they're not going to use it. That's probably the biggest mistake I see people make when they launch a community, when they're running a community. Second biggest mistake I see people make is that they don't resource it properly. And this is to Danny's point about the horizontal, which I love, that you have to make sure that when you're gathering feedback, you have a place for it to go, and that it's heard and it's acted upon. And you have that buy-in across the organization. Specific to 2021, there is a huge focus on safety and security in communities. And I think that's why you're seeing people, John, you touched on this in the beginning, why people are starting to trend away from public networks into these more private branded communities, because you can control the environment. And so I think we're going to see that continue to shift. So I also think people need to be very cognizant of creating that sense of safety in the communities and making it very clear what they're doing with the data. And when we talk about the personalization, people expect that. They want a personalized experience. But you also have to use the data you're collecting very wisely. So personalize that experience, but make it known what you're doing with their data, and don't be stupid about the personalization that you're doing. And that's a really hard balance to strike sometimes. But it's things like, if collect only the data that you need to collect about people. Sage advice: don't collect data about their children. Yeah, like, I mean, there's some really good rules out there about doing the right thing, being very respectful about people's data.
Yeah, I would just echo Heather's point on, owning your platform versus relying on one you do not own, like a Facebook group, is very key in modern times. You get to manage that conversation, you get to own the data, and you get to control the roadmap of what happens to that versus, one day Facebook may decide to shut down your group without any notice. Good luck with that.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
it's
Since we're
go for it, Heather.
Oh yeah, I was just going to say, since we're using analogies today, we talk a lot about building a house on rented land. Like,
Yeah, it totally makes sense, and I've seen it myself this last couple of years. Tons of people wanting to have their own branded, their own owned platform, and have that control and that flexibility. And if you've already been down that path a little bit, you have your site. My thing for people this year is connect your data, right? If you've already got your community started, and you've gotten those first steps, and you're getting some traction, it's really now time you need to connect those data points, connect with the other systems, using third-party data systems or whatever you need to do to pull it into some BI intelligence engine to where you can really see value. So that's my go-to tip for this year, is connect your data. Okay, so I think we're right at the top of the hour, and I think that's so. Does anybody else have any questions or anything else they want to plug before we get out of here?
I see one from Ashish about internal communities and cross collaboration. So, the community is a great place for that. Again, if you think about, all of your customer success managers as an example, they're sending out dozens of emails a week to different accounts. Well, guess what? They can manage the same conversation. They can manage it in a single threaded community with their customers by redirecting them to a CSM discussion board as an example. But even cross company, that's another way how you can drive and influence the value proposition by getting your teammates from other departments to be involved in the community.
The internal community always is like the learning ground for your external community. Like, you would have your internal community and people would start using it and get programs, and they'd be like, well, why can't I do this with my customer? And I'd be like, well, you can, just over here, right? And then they would jump on and start participating in the external community. So there's definitely can go hand in hand. Okay, well, I think we're about done today. Thanks so much, everybody, for joining us. I just know that communities are continue to grow and evolve, and they've been solving problems for the last 20 years, right? And I think communities are going to be in a position to solve these connectivity and these problems and to really help out. So keep moving forward with community, and like I said, the community of community people are very helpful. So always reach out to me or Heather or Danny and Donnie, and there is so many good groups out there of people to connect. So if you have questions, reach out to another community person and they'll be gladly help you.
Thank you so much. Oh, wow, that was amazing. Donnie, Heather, John, you guys are truly wonderful, and you've given the marketers here a lot to think about. So thank you guys.